Hello and welcome to Wizards, Warriors, and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Herne, author of The Thunder Heist, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, starting with Rob.
Oh, hi, I'm Rob J. Hayes, author of Spirits of Vengeance, which this is going out on Monday, I guess. So this is out tomorrow.
Heck yeah! I'm excited for that one. And Mike.
Hi, I am Michael R. Fletcher, author of Norilska Groans and Ghosts of Tomorrow, among other books.
Awesome. And we would normally be joined by Dirk, but Dirk can't make this episode's recording, so he is with us in spirit. If you see a freaky ghost in the background anywhere, or you hear, there we go. There's a little, Rob's holding up a little.
Well, I'll just be quiet for a long time and pretend that he's talking.
Yeah.
You can sit there.
Dirk can sit in the corner of our frame. So he's not here for this episode, but he is with us in spirit. And today's episode comes from a listener question. Listener wrote in saying, I absolutely love your podcast, would like to hear about writing a good friendship. And this is a topic that I find quite interesting because I think when I look at the stories that I find really rereadable, they're often stories that have great friendships between different characters. The Harry Potter books are a very obvious example of this. To a lesser extent, I think the Lies of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastard series, has some really good central friendships in that, which make it very entertaining to read. To start things off, for Rob and Mike, how important do you think good friendships between different characters are, or interesting friendships are, in the stories that you like to read or write?
I've never really thought about friendships per se so much as relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And relationships are obviously are critical in your stories, just because that's life. Because of the kind of stuff that I like to write, I tend to dig into sort of unbalanced relationships, and they can be the friendships, but as with many probably real friendships, it's not necessarily on equal sitting. You've got half the party sort of has more power, or I remember thinking when I was a kid, like back in high school, first dating, it was like, whoever has the most problems rules the relationship. And that idea kind of stuck with me. It's not necessarily true, but I
certainly agree with that. Well, I think it's not so much like whoever has the most problems, but it's whoever is the most emotional about their problems often is the one who is in charge, in a sense. Like if one of you is like, I've stubbed my toe, it hurts, and the other person's like, I've stubbed my toe, this is the worst thing in the world. Like, obviously your attention is going to the person who is more emotionally
as somebody who is always quietly broken in the background. I never ruled the relationship.
The person who's open is the one who's going to essentially rule it, whereas the person who's closed is the one who's going to sit there and suffer in silence. Wow,
dropping some wisdom bombs on this podcast, guys. This is good. The relationship show with Chen, Rob, and Mike.
That's it. We'll turn it into the Agony Aunt show. Listeners, write in and we'll try and solve your relationship problems.
That would actually be pretty cool. Maybe if you have similar things like that and you don't mind us talking about it with absolutely zero skill or training, please send them in. Sorry, Mike, continue with your point.
What was that? Unbalanced relationships, friendships. I mean, for me, there's got to be some combination, some sharing of goals, and some differences as well. There's got to be some tension in the friendship, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because of like the kind of friends that I have. Humor has to be like a big part of it. I find that like those funny moments, those quick little barbs, quick little bits of banter, can really kind of hammer home a friendship or a relationship much better than a long drawn out emotional scene.
Especially if you have like little, if you can somehow have a little in-joke between the characters that is still funny to the reader who's essentially not in on the joke, those can be really good at helping to just build the idea that it's like it can be a long-standing relationship. Say you've got like a couple of characters who have known each other for their entire lives or whatever. Having those little moments are great for just convincing that this relationship is real. It's been going on a long time. I also find there's an ease, like if you have friends who have known each other forever, there is a certain ease to the relationship that they just, sort of understanding, maybe not agreeing with, but there's just that sort of like idea of understanding, and just it's easy. Even with tension, the relationship itself is easy, and I think that's another good one to make sure that it really feels like the characters have known each other for a while.
And with those in-jokes and past mentions between characters, that stuff can actually be really easy to write, especially if you leave it kind of vague. Even if it's as simple as being like, oh, this is just like that time back in Azane or whatever. And the other character laughs at that, or like says, oh, don't talk about that. I don't want to mention that thing again or whatever. You can just do these really little sort of vague things. And it's an easy way to build that sense that there's this shared history and this shared backstory between characters. And it's cool because, yeah, you just leave it vague, and it's basically the character reaction that tells readers, oh, okay, this is something that's meaningful and important between the two of them. I think, Mike, you've hit on a key point there, though, which is that the relationships that are usually most interesting in a story are ones that have an element of tension to it. And that's why when I think about a lot of good, like, fictional relationships and friendships, they are actually not really friendships that you would necessarily want to have in real life, but they're interesting to read about because there is that tension between them. And it very may well be the case that these two characters do not get along for 80% of the book, and they're just sort of forced together. They're forced into this journey with each other. But like through the bantering between them, they kind of grow together in their pursuit of this shared goal. And even though it's not necessarily a friendship per se until maybe the end, it's still a very interesting relationship to read about, because you're kind of following this progression from maybe rivals through to grudging allies through to then friends. And I think that progression is a really fun part of reading relationships and stories as well.
Yeah, and I think I'd throw in, kind of treat it like real life. We're different people depending on who we're with, and I think it's true of everybody. With like one friend, you might be funnier. You've got more of a laughing, joking relationship. With another friend, it's more serious. With like a girlfriend or spouse or significant other, it's different again. And if you can show that in your story, if you can have three people traveling together and interacting differently with each other in a way that the readers are going to pick up on, and that's fantastic character building moments there, not just for your main character, but for your background characters. That kind of shit, it really subtly, I think, can bring to life your characters.
Yeah, it just shows the complexity that exists in real life relationships. That's I'm reading a book that mentions basically exactly what you're saying right now, which is called Character by Rob McKee. It's really good, about halfway through. And yeah, he's just had a whole chapter about how people behave totally differently depending on the social context they're in. You're subservient with your boss, like maybe you're like demeaning to the workers that are underneath you in an organization. Maybe with your family, you're like really impatient or annoying or whatever it is. And yeah, I think if you can show that in your book in a way that feels consistent with your character, like that will really elevate you quite highly above a lot of other authors. Because I think a lot of authors do approach it in the sense of, this character is funny, so therefore they're funny with their boss, they're funny with their inferiors, they're funny with their friends. And really, it's probably a case of, okay, maybe that's what they're like when they have their guard down, but when they have these different masks on around certain different people, they behave in these other ways. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Mike. Really like that.
Thanks.
It's also a good way to have to sort of increase the tension, especially if you have multiple characters, say they're sort of traveling, journeying together, and they have those sort of different relationships between them. Like if you have like a couple traveling together with another person who's also a friend, that can be really weird, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, couples are fucking weird. Like they do weird things, and it's fine between them. But as an outside observer, you'll be like,
what are you doing?
Odd.
100%. And that's one of the most satisfying things in particularly big fantasy stories, where you have a large cast of characters that might be operating in their own little groups, is bringing all those groups together and then seeing how they collide when they're in an environment where all of these people are there rather than just one person at a time. Like that's one of my favorite things to see with these big epic fantasy series, is when, you might start following these people in different parts of the continent, and then gradually they get together, and then the ways that they interact are often quite unexpected and rewarding.
Oh yeah, those moments of collision are awesome. They're definitely something that as a reader you look forward to. You like,
yes,
you want to see how they're going to interact, what's going to happen, which sparks are going to fly. So that can definitely be something that's fun to include.
Absolutely. So we're going to pause this episode for a second just to talk about a cool thing that I've launched recently. So I have created a new writing advice newsletter called Writing Advice Wednesday. Already got the name wrong. That's a solid start. And basically what it is it's a really short 2-minute newsletter that goes out every Wednesday where I share 3 ideas about the craft of writing from myself, 2 quotes from other writers, and 1 question for you to ponder. So if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, I'm just going to share my screen and you'll be able to see what my what one of those newsletters look like. If I can get it up on here. Elevator music plays in the background. It'll be worth it.
We're not childish.
No, not at all. Okay, here we go. All right. You guys should probably be able to see this as well. Yeah, so this is the example of the first newsletter that's gone out. So talking about engaging prose, blank pages, and a writer's highest priority. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this, but basically, yeah, I just share 3 different ideas about writing from myself.
This is showing us the porn you're downloading in the background, right?
Wait, what? That is the premium subscription model, which costs extra if you want to be part of that. If you want to see what's below the Zoom screen, then that's the model you can sign up to. So basically, 3 ideas for myself, 2 quotes from other people, and then a question for you to consider. After this episode airs, 2 days after this episode airs, I will actually be posting an audio version of this first newsletter. So if you're just listening to the podcast right now and you're like, I can't read this because you're showing it on the screen, just hold on for 2 days and an audio version of that will be out on the podcast feed. So to get that newsletter, it's totally free. You can just go to jedhearn.com/Wednesday. The link to that is also in the show notes below. So jedhearn.com/Wednesday. And we'll see how it goes. This is an experiment, but I've got a lot of various index cards of writing advice that I've accumulated over the years, and a lot of different writing advice books I've read. So would love to share this with you guys in a very concise and digestible format. And now back to the episode.
You are so damn organized. You have reference cards.
Crazy.
Yeah, I can show you some of them actually. So these are a couple of the ones for writing stuff here. I don't know if you can see, but behind me down here, those are all my index cards here.
Jesus.
So I've got them for various topics. So there's like great questions, cognition and critical thinking, meaning, purpose and motivation, productivity, relationships and emotional intelligence, and then just random curiosity gems and a bunch of other stuff there as well. So yeah, I found it really useful because I'm sure you guys have had this experience of you're reading a book and you're like, damn, that's so profound. I really want to remember this. And then you get 2 pages later and you've totally forgotten about it. So yeah, I just try to write down little gems of wisdom whenever I come across them, and it's accumulated quite substantially. So yeah, these are all the ones that are specifically about writing stuff. There's not as many here because I've only sort of tracked that recently. But yeah, we've got a Stephen King quote in there.
You need to go through all of our old episodes and write down all of these pearls of wisdom that we drop.
Yeah, well, I think I do have a couple of things that you guys have said down in my index cards. I'm pretty sure they're down there somewhere. Or if not, maybe I've just appropriated them and I'm like, oh, I've come up with this by myself, when really it was Mike saying something wise like, the young shall do many drugs to provide maximum creative freedom. I seem to recall that from a previous episode.
That does sound like me, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The advocate of party.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks for letting me sidetrack the episode to mention those weird projects.
Give us a choice.
No, basically, it's not a democracy, it's a dictatorship. Thanks for recognizing that, Mike. Very much appreciate it.
That's master.
You get your food for the rest of the week. Well done. No, we don't feed Mike at all. That's a dangerous idea. So what do you guys reckon? Coming back to the topic at hand, I'd be very curious to know what friendships or relationships in books that you've read did you enjoy the most?
It's one of those. That's an incredibly hard question to answer, because there's so many, and there's so many different types of relationship. You mentioned Lies of Locke Lamora, and I did find Locke and John to be really. They just had that. It was that ease of friendship. Yeah, there was tension. Yeah, they sparked off each other, but at the end of the day, they always had each other's back, and they knew which way the other one was going to jump most of the time. And I love that sort of relationship between them. It really came across that they were good friends as well as allies. And some of those relationships are definitely the ones that I find most fun to read about. Those ones where the characters just know each other so well that they have each other's back, and they're always there to help out and protect each other, even when they don't agree.
Yes. Yes. Different opinions, same values.
So that was definitely a friendship that I found a very compelling one that I've read about.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's probably the one that comes to my mind as the best like fictional friendship between two characters in a book series that I can remember reading. And I think it's the fact that that series really, they are friends for pretty much from the ages of 6 to presumably their mid-20s when the books are taking place. So I think it really, to your point, Mike, about having that sense of ease around friendships, it really helps that they do these flashbacks showing them, like becoming friends when they're younger orphans and sticking up for each other and helping each other get out of scrapes 20 years ago. And then now showing them in the present, also sticking up for each other, also helping each other get out of scrapes. And that sense of time and the shared history between them really creates a high degree of realism, I think, to that relationship. And yeah, there's so many good points where it looks like one of them might betray each other, or they disagree so strongly about what they're doing, but they still really respect each other and they still fundamentally have these same core values. I think that's a kind of cool way to structure it, is like put tension in there and then sort of underlie it with these core values. Or I think, Mike, you were saying before, this idea of having a shared goal that they're working towards. And that creates, a good sense of realism while also having conflict and also being interesting to read about. Mike, what would you say are some of the relationships or friendships that stand out for you?
The best book I've read recently for that would be Crystal Matar's Legacy of the Brightwash. We had her on last week or whatever.
Yes.
She actually took a neat approach to it. So she's got characters with who are friends or in relationships. Some who have shared goals, some who have maybe slightly clashing goals, but they're still friends, because just because you're friends doesn't mean you all want the same thing. And then just sort of the added tension is, even though they're friends, they often have some core values that clash a little bit. Whether it's upholding the law or loyalty to family, because these two things can clash, right?
Yes.
And for me, like, she did that amazingly well. They were like really well done friendships and relationships, in that they were kind of ugly sometimes, and they were tested, they were tried, and that tension, she does relationships like amazingly well. I mean, that is such a character book, and if you're going to have a character driven book, like, you got to be good at relationships.
Yes.
Or making them ugly.
So you're gonna be bad at relationships in real life and then translate that into your stories, or be really good at your relationships in real life and be like, what's the exact opposite of what I would do in this situation? I think that's a cool way of looking at it, in the sense of like, maybe a good question that writers could ask themselves as they're developing these relationships is like, and you can ask this for each of your characters, why will this character love this other character? And why will they also hate this character? And if you can find a way to hold those two aspects in your mind, then that will probably lead to a very interesting dynamic between the friendship, because it'll mean that these characters have an amazing, like a reason why they really, really respect each other, and then also disagree completely on some, fundamental values that underpin that, and that constant tension between them should make for some interesting stories.
It also leads to another sort of question that you could ask yourself as a writer, which is, what would it take to break the friendship? If you have these two characters who have this type friendship, there is still a level where it will break. Yes. So what will it take? What does one of them need to do to break that friendship? Which can also lead to some interesting things in writing of, well, what happens if you do break the relationship, if you break that friendship? How do the characters split off from one another? And yeah, can it be mended again, or is it, once broken, is it irrevocably, I can't say that word right now,
irrevocably destroyed,
irrevocably broken?
Can't be
nailed it first time.
Nice. We'll fix that in post.
Yeah,
if I could be bothered to edit these things.
But
no, I like that, Rob. I like that.
There's always that idea of you have these. They like to say they're tropes. Everybody likes to say everything's a trope, but you have the friends to enemies, the enemies to friends tropes. All of those sorts of things. And yeah,
I want to smack every single person who bitches about tropes or talks about them at all. It's like, you being
tropes are there for a reason. They're good.
For a reason to sort of like poo-poo or ignore something. It's like, fuck up, just read the fucking book and find out what the writer did cool or not,
Yep.
But like, oh, it's got this trope.
Well, it's like complaining that books have tropes is like complaining that it also uses capital letters and full stops. Of course it uses basic elements of story structure. Like without that, it's just a shambling hallucinogenic mess. So very happy with that.
So one of Fletcher's books.
It does actually, yeah. Sorry, Mike, bit of a pot shot at you there. But no, Rob, I love that question of, what will it take to break this friendship? Because I think another cool thing about friendships and deep relationships between characters is that people who are friends with a particular character are probably the ones best equipped to attack their unique weaknesses in a way that a antagonist probably can't. So, if you have your big scary bad that's running around trying to kill your main character, they are kind of like a physically and maybe like psychologically intimidating threat, but the main character's best friend is probably providing more emotional conflict in that story because they know all of the main character's insecurities. They have that backstory together, and it means that if things do turn sour between them, they can actually be the most effective one at harming them. And I think a good example, and I'll try to steer clear of spoilers, although this is an old book, is Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, which, Mike, I know you've read. You read that like about a year ago now, I think, or reread it. And yeah, I just finished it recently, and it's incredible for doing what you're saying, Rob, in the sense of it takes these two different characters, Monza, who's the main character, and Shivers, who is this other character as well, and it sort of takes them from just nothing through to like allies, through to friends, through to lovers. And then Abercrombie does the classic thing where you're like, hang on, they've ended up in a loving relationship, but it's only the middle of a book. What's going on here? And it's because things don't just end happily ever after in a Joe Abercrombie novel, and it splinters from there. And they provide like the core of the conflict for each other in the second half of the book because they have grown to know each other very, very well. And it means that they can attack each other's individual weaknesses so well throughout the rest of the novel. So I thought that was a great example of a very complicated relationship. And even the relationships between all the characters in that book, as with anything that Abercrombie writes, really were just stellar. And there's a lot of the cases where, the different characters in this central crew of 7 that is trying to get this revenge mission done, they all have their kind of individual spokes of relationships with each other in a way that makes it feel very fleshed out and realistic as well. All right. So any last thoughts before we wrap up this particular episode?
I'd say do a little reading on psychology, understand that people react differently, have different filters depending on who they're with. Men tend to treat women differently than they treat other men. Same with women. Age matters, like if you're dealing with a kid, you're going to sort of talk differently, you can interact differently. Chances are use different filters. Just trying to write something with a hint of reality.
Yeah, just be good, basically.
Yeah,
easy. Just be awesome.
It comes naturally, or you can't write. You just gotta give up.
50 episodes in, the secret is out. This podcast won't help you at all. It's all genetics. There's no skill involved.
I don't know. I just think look at your own friendships. See what drives them. See how you act like. You meet up with a bunch of friends, and it might be that you know each other so well that you just bounce jokes of each other. Insults don't mean anything because you know each other that well that you can insult each other, but it's fine because you're friends. That's what you do. But then you meet up with other friends, and it might be completely different. It might be much more sort of emotional, in that sort of sense. So just take from real life, I suppose.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's been a really good episode. Once again, if you want to check out that new writing advice newsletter that I've just started up, go to jedherne.com/Wednesday. The link to that will also be in the show notes down below. Thank you also to our patrons for supporting this episode. And a special shout out to our high tier patron, Daniel Henderson. If you are not already on Patreon, get on there now because Rob Hayes has a free advanced reader copy of Spirits of Vengeance, his latest Mortal Techniques novel, exclusive on our Patreon as well, even though it will come out tomorrow for everyone to buy. But you can get it for free if you go onto our Patreon. So go into our Patreon, look at that thick boy. It's a lovely thick book. It's got some great graphic design on it, great author name on it, and some amazing cover. Oh, that's pretty. Rob showing the inside of the book. It's got, is that on the hardcover? The front of the hardcover shows this.
That's the hardcover. That's the dust jacket, and then you take it off, and it's all very classy and stuff. And then there's even a quote from Fletcher on the back.
Is there?
If I can,
Dirk Fletcher. The Seven Samurai meets Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon by Dirk Fletcher, author of Paternus. Nice.
And then there's also the one above it, made me want to watch martial arts movies again, by Michael R. Ashton.
They'll never know. Yeah, classic. Classic.
Sorry, I know we're not meant to be doing that joke anymore, but tough.
No, it's fine later in the episode once people actually know our real names. We can crack around on that joke as much as we want. But yeah, check out the newsletter. Check out Spirits of Vengeance tomorrow. Exciting couple of days coming up, really, for listeners of the show. Thank you everybody for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Oh,
see ya.